The Hunter in vanilla World of Warcraft has perhaps one of the most notorious reputations in the game, infamous worldwide for taking every single piece of armor and weaponry that drops, having a pet that happily runs off to pull dungeons on their own, and of course forgetting to turn Growl off. They are portrayed as very noob-friendly when, in reality, the amount of pitfalls this class can have can make it quite the noob trap. They also have quite defined strengths and weaknesses. They're known to do quite well early on into gearing, but tend to fall off later. They can decimate any class in a 1v1 when they can kite, but struggle once you close the gap. And Hunters also perhaps have the most unique game mechanics out of every class, between pet handling, the dead zone, in and out of combat traps, ammo, the list goes on. My first ever character in World of Warcraft was a Night Elf Hunter, and I'm sure that back then I lived up to all the expectations, and over the years it's a class that I keep going back to. So all in all, I'm pretty excited to talk about this class today, and to check over the runes the Hunter will receive in Season of Discovery. With all that said, let's make a start on the chest runes. Expose Weakness will make it so ranged crits increase your attack power by 40% of your current agility for 7 seconds. This talent single-handedly made survival a relevant utility pick during TBC, because whenever you crit, everyone gained 25% of your agility as attack power against that target. In Wrath, this talent still exists, but it's been changed to a personal buff. The Season of Discovery version is going with a personal buff too, it seems, and it's a hefty 40% of your agility at that. I guess the bigger number on this makes sense, as in vanilla, we are dealing with far lower numbers as a whole. I don't think this rune will see much play at level 25 though, as we're barely going to have any agility to benefit from. But when we start hitting 50 and especially 60, this is going to be granting a ton of stats. So not the best at the moment, but expect good things from this in the future. Also imagine how well this will scale with world buffs and things like Blessing of Kings. Speaking of Blessing of Kings, this leads me on to the next rune. Now this one was only very recently added after feedback from many players that it seemed as though at the level 25 bracket the Alliance were getting the better end of the deal from the new runes. Well, now Hunters will be getting Aspect of the Lion. This chest rune engraving gives all nearby allies 10% bonus stats and increases the total stats for the Hunter by an additional 10%. So Horde, this is your Blessing of Kings. Also, I'm assuming that Aspect of the Lion and Blessing of Kings will not stack, similar to how the Druid and Shaman Windfury won't stack. Next we have Master Marksman, 5% bonus crit and 25% less mana cost on your shots. It's not bad, and mana can be very much of an issue on the Hunter in vanilla. They're still going to use mana, of course, and we don't have Aspect of the Viper in the game either. I think there will be some fights where this can be optimal, and even then you can just chug mana pots on cooldown in vanilla. The cooldown of potions still resets during combat, so I think this seems on the weaker side compared to some of the other options we have. Next we have Cobra Strikes. It makes the Hunter's crits cause your pets next to special attacks to also crit. So yes, there is going to be a Beast Mastery package that has been included on the runes so far. This could be okay, but there is a bigger picture as to whether or not this will be a thing, because I'll be honest, with how the game is at the moment, Beast Mastery just won't see play outside of leveling. The simple reason is Hunter pets do not scale with the Hunter's gear, so they're okay early game, but as the Hunter gets more powerful, your pet doesn't. Now, I don't really want to get too much into the data mine stuff in these videos since it is not confirmed, but there was something about pet scaling floating about on patch 1.15, which is the Season of Discovery build. Hunter pets being viable in PvE depend pretty much entirely on whether or not this is real. Originally, Hunter pets began to scale in TBC, and Beast Mastery Hunter was one of the best DPS in the game for the entire game. So if BM ends up being good, the potential is there. There is another issue though, and that's currently vanilla pets do not have Avoidance, which is just a passive that makes them take less AoE damage. So even if they scaled, they would really have to be focused by healers on certain encounters. Time will tell, but with the info we currently have, this is kind of just for leveling if you fancy playing it during leveling. Finally, for the chest runes is the best rune we've seen for Hunters so far, Lone Wolf. So let me get this straight, I get to not use a pet and I get 25% more damage with everything. I would have signed up for this at a 10% buff. A 25% aura buff to everything is incredible. Your pet isn't doing anywhere near that much damage, and you don't have to deal with how dumb pets are in vanilla. Basically, in PvE, nobody's using a pet again if this rune stays the way it is. It's kind of like Warlock in a way. You use Demonic Sacrifice for nearly the whole of vanilla in TBC, and it's only been in Wrath where you are actually a pet class. I guess Hunters join the club now. On to the next rune, which is Kill Command. Essentially what this does is make your pet's next 3 special attacks do some extra damage. I'd have preferred the TBC version where you can activate this after you crit and your pet does some instant damage, which is a more interesting version in my opinion. This is kind of just macro it into something and forget it exists. It's probably okay for Beast Mastery, but that's about it. Sniper Training. Your shot abilities gain 30% increased crit chance when you have not moved for 6 seconds. Well, I have to say, I love and hate this rune already. So just for some context here, this is a modified talent from Wrath of the Lich King, where in that expansion, a few of your shots gain 15% crit after you have not moved for 6 seconds. But you keep this buff for 15 seconds once it's active, so even if you do need to move a bit, you can keep the buff going quite easily. If this is just 6 seconds of standing still and you move half an inch and lose 30% crit, I don't think that's going to feel very good to play with, but it is 30% crit to all shots. That is a very big number, so maybe it has to be this punishing. Either way, you add this together and Lone Wolf, and Hunters are going to be doing a lot of damage early on. Next is Serpent Spread. So yeah, Serpent Sting, not that great to be honest. You are already multi-shotting on AoE I suppose, and it is 3 free Serpent Stings, so I guess it's mana efficient, but Hunters just really aren't there for AoE. Because aside from this, the damage will be coming from Volley and Explosive Trap, both of which don't scale with attack power in vanilla, so I would just focus more on doing good single targets instead. Next is Flanking Strike. You and your pet deal 100% melee damage. Wait, what? Yeah, melee damage. So the melee hunter is here in vanilla, all the way from Legion. Didn't see that one coming. After you use this ability, Raptor Strike and Mongoose Spike gain bonus damage, with Raptor Strike having a chance to reset the cooldown on Flanking Strike. So, okay, this is interesting. In Legion, I played a bit of Survival Hunter when it got changed to melee, and it did have this damage window focused around stacking Mongoose Bite up, so it seems we're getting something inspired loosely by that. I guess finally Hunters can roll on melee weapons and say it's not just a stat stick. Oh, and Hunters will want Edge Masters too, I suppose. I'm honestly not sure whether Melee Hunter is still just a giant meme. I kind of think that it is, but this is one we really need to try on the live servers, and it's hard to judge just from reading the runes. I do hope it's somewhat decent though. You know what, total side note here, if this were me doing this whole class rework thing, I'd have tried to make Survival into a Spell Power spec instead. There used to be murmurings about Spell Power Hunter being somewhat possible, but you can make Hunters equip Mail Gear with Spell Power on, have a portion of your shots do arcane damage, and make the spec all about traps, Serpent Sting, and then get a pet such as a Chimera or a Wind Serpent, whose a Lightning Breath scales with Spell Power, all of that kind of stuff. I think it would have been cool to see. But anyway, we're getting Melee Hunter, so that's that. I have another thing I want to bring up real quick here. It's more relevant for Melee Hunters, I suppose. It's another one of these data mine things, so not confirmed, but it would be a big change, so I'm going to include it here. And that's the text saying traps can only be placed outside of combat has been removed on the Season of Discovery PTR from all traps. On top of that, traps now have a 40-yard range on the tooltip, so it's possible you can trap in combat, and maybe there's even a trap launcher effect. This is a considerably larger PvP buff than PvE in my opinion, but maybe there are new traps in the future which would heavily benefit from this change. We'll have to wait and see whether this one's real, but it would be a big buff to all aspects of Hunter gameplay. Finally, we have our glove runes. Starting on the creatively named Beast Mastery rune, increases pets damage and health by 30% and focus regen by 80%. Also, Growl is now a 3-second taunt. So I'm going to repeat what I've already said about this. BM needs pets to scale, or this is just going to be for leveling. If hypothetically they did scale though, this should be enough focus regen to really spam Bite and Claw. And a 30% damage buff isn't anything to ignore either. Imagine in the future of the season if pets get scaling and then later on Hunters get Steady Shot or something like that, and we end up with TBC levels of BM Hunter. It could happen, it could not. We'll have to find out on that. Next is Chimera Shot, giving the hunter an ability with different effects depending on the active sting. Serpent Sting will cause bonus damage, Viper Sting restores mana, and Scorpion Sting will disarm for 10 seconds. So, hunters just gotta disarm? That's pretty good in PvP, and may also have niche PvE uses. Other than that, this is a really powerful ability, which will be a big, satisfying button to press each time it comes up. I can see this shot being the absolute go-to for gloves. Because the other choice is Explosive Shot, which is of course the capstone talent of the Wrath of the Lich King Survival Hunter. Unfortunately for vanilla, it seems just to be doing magic damage, which is not what we want on the hunter. We want things that scale with weapon damage, as magic effects, as I've mentioned once or twice, do not scale with attack power in vanilla. It might be decent early game, but it's gonna get outscaled so hard by Chimera Shot if the game works the way I expect it to. Also, we don't have a lock and load talent either, which is kind of what makes Explosive Shot fun to use in the first place. Again, imagine if they did my spell damage hunter with this instead, it would be way more interesting. Oh well, maybe later on in the season or something. Finally, we have Carve, which strikes enemies in front of you for 50% weapon damage. It's kind of like a semi-circle whirlwind. Still, it's some AoE for the more melee-focused hunter, and it would seem you have this rune or Beast Mastery to choose from in this row. So those are all of our hunter runes, so let's talk about them a bit. With an initial cap of 25, I'm expecting great things from the hunter. This class is known to be so powerful at low levels, and I can see a game where Lone Wolf Sniper training Chimera Shot Hunter is putting them near, if not at the top of DPS meters. This class is going to be a menace on the threat meter, especially when they don't get Feign Death until level 30. The prospect of ranged traps that can be used in combat is a big departure from vanilla design, but it is just data mine details at the moment. And if I'm honest, I don't think this changes much in PvE at the moment. Definitely very strong in PvP though. Hunters' scaling woes appear to have so far largely been unanswered. Pets need to bulk up with their master, or they just won't be used and everyone will take Lone Wolf. Also, they kind of need avoidance. Usually I shy away from just copy-pasting an answer from a later expansion, but in this case, this really just is a good answer to the problem. And in my opinion, it is a bit of a problem. And it's the same story with magical effects having no attack power scaling. You have Serpent Sting, Arcane Shot, Volley, Explosive Trap, and so on. The hunter has a lot of magic damage. Having these things just do base damage for the whole game is part of the hunter's weak scaling issue. This is part of the reason why I mentioned actually doing a full-on spell power hunter as an alternative to just adding scaling too, because if you did give hunters attack power scaling, there will be a whole bunch of other classes asking for the same treatment. And then are we really discovering anything new, or are we just doing what expansions did? I am looking forwards to seeing how far the melee hunter can be pushed though. It should be more of a two-handed build all in all, and I'm really not expecting it to top the meters by any means, but hey, we'll have to wait and see. I think Marksman is overall a big winner here, and that Lone Wolf build I've mentioned once or twice will be really powerful early game. And that's the hunter. I always end up playing hunter at some point, so I'm sure I'll try and make the melee dream work eventually. But what do you think about the hunters so far in Season of Discovery? Anything you're looking forwards to? And is it a class you will be playing? Let me know down below. And as always, thank you all so much for watching and listening in. And I'll see you all in the next one very soon.